The massive windows of the Galactic Military Academy's training hall showed the 3 moons of planet Axis floating in the purple sky. Inside, Cadet Jai-Ho Park moved through his evening exercise routine with careful steps. At 18 years old, he was one of only 10 humans accepted into the academy this year. Jai-Ho liked to train alone in the evenings. The quiet helped him focus, and he didn't have to worry about other students watching him. Being from Earth meant his movements were naturally faster and stronger than most other species, thanks to Earth's higher gravity. He didn't want to draw attention to himself. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Jai-Ho stopped his exercise and turned to see his friend Su-Min rushing in. Her silver Cadet uniform was wrinkled, and her dark hair had fallen loose from its usual neat style. "Jai-Ho, you need to come quickly," she said, trying to catch her breath. "Grand Warlord Q1 is visiting the academy. He's asking about you." Jai-Ho wiped his face with a towel. "The Warlord? Why would he care about a first-year cadet?" "He saw your combat scores," Su-Min explained. "You got perfect marks in every simulation. No one has done that since the academy opened 300 years ago." Jai-Ho frowned. He had tried to keep his scores private, but apparently news had spread. "I was just lucky," he said quietly. "Lucky?" Su-Min shook her head. "Jai-Ho, you beat every combat scenario they have. The Warlord is furious that a human rookie could do something he never managed." Before Jai-Ho could respond, heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. Grand Warlord Q1 entered, followed by a group of academy officials. He was tall, with broad shoulders and gray skin that showed his age. His black uniform carried dozens of medals and honors from his many victories. The Warlord's eyes locked onto Jai-Ho. "So this is the human prodigy." His voice was deep and carried across the room easily. "You don't look very impressive." Jai-Ho bowed respectfully. "Welcome to the academy, sir. I'm honored by your visit." "Save your politeness," Q1 said. "I've come to see your skills for myself. 300 years I've served the Alliance, and never has a first-year cadet claimed such perfect scores." He walked closer, looking down at Jai-Ho. Unless, of course, the systems were modified to favor Earth students. The Academy's director stepped forward. "Sir, I assure you our systems are completely fair. Cadet Park earned his scores honestly. Then he won't mind proving it." The Warlord smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I challenge you, Cadet Park, to traditional combat. 3 days from now, in the Grand Arena. We'll see how well your perfect scores translate to real fighting." The room went silent. Everyone knew that refusing a formal challenge from a warlord would bring shame not just to Jai-Ho, but to Earth itself. The Alliance worlds would see it as proof that humans were cowards. Jai-Ho stood straight and met the warlord's eyes. "I accept your challenge, sir." Q1 nodded. "Good. I look forward to teaching you and your planet a lesson in humility." He turned and walked out, his followers hurrying after him. When they were gone, Su-Min grabbed Jai-Ho's arm. "Are you crazy? He's won every battle he's ever fought. He once defeated an entire rebel fleet by himself." Jai-Ho picked up his towel and water bottle. "I know, but I can't refuse. Earth is still new to the Alliance. If I back down, it will hurt all humans who want to join the Academy in the future." He started walking toward the door. "Where are you going?" Su-Min called after him. "To call my grandmother," Jai-Ho answered. "If I'm going to fight a warlord, I'll need her advice. She's the one who taught me everything I know about combat." As he left the training hall, Jai-Ho felt strangely calm. In 3 days, he would either make history or become another warning story about human pride. Either way, there was no turning back now. Commander Ha-Wan Lee's office was small but neat. The walls displayed medals and certificates from her 30 years of service. She looked at Jai-Ho with concern as he explained the challenge. "This is serious, Cadet Park," she said, placing her hands on her desk. "Grand Warlord Q1 is not known for mercy in combat. Have you seen the records of his previous fights?" Jai-Ho shook his head. "No, Commander. I thought those were restricted. Commander Lee typed on her computer and turned the screen toward him. Watch this. It's from his last challenge match. The video showed Q1 fighting a tall, muscular opponent. The fight lasted less than 2 minutes. Q1's movements were precise and brutal. His opponent left the arena with 3 broken bones. That was the champion from Centauri Prime, Commander Lee explained. He spent 6 months in medical recovery, and he was lucky compared to some others. Jai-Ho watched the video again, studying Q1's fighting style. He relies on his right side for most attacks, he noted, and he gets closer to his opponent before striking than he needs to. Commander Lee nodded, looking impressed. Good observation. But knowing his patterns isn't enough. The Warlord has fought in hundreds of battles. You've only been at the academy for 4 months. 6 months, Jai-Ho corrected quietly. But I trained with my grandmother for 15 years before coming here. Ah yes, the famous Grandmother Park. Commander Lee smiled slightly. The one who taught you Earth's ancient combat arts. But Earth techniques weren't designed for fighting opponents like Q1. Jai-Ho stood up straighter. No, but they were designed for fighting stronger opponents. My grandmother always said the art of combat is about using your enemy's strength against them. A knock at the door interrupted them. Su-Min entered, carrying a datapad. Her face was pale. Jai-Ho, Commander, you need to see this. She placed the pad on the desk. It showed official records of Q1's previous challengers. Look at what happened to them after their matches, she said. Commander Lee read through the files, her expression growing darker. Training accidents, equipment failures, sudden transfers to distant posts. She looked up at Jai-Ho. These aren't coincidences. He makes sure no one can tell stories about fighting him, win or lose. But he can't do anything to me, Jai-Ho said. Earth would protest if a human cadet was harmed after an official match. That's probably why he's so angry, Su-Min added. You're the first human he's challenged. He can't use his usual methods to keep you quiet. Commander Lee stood up and walked to the window. The academy's training field stretched out below, filled with cadets from 100 different worlds. Jai-Ho, you can still withdraw. I can file a medical report saying you're not fit for combat. Your career would survive. Jai-Ho looked at the video of Q1's fight again. The Warlord's movements were powerful but predictable. Like many stronger fighters, he didn't expect his opponents to last long enough to learn his patterns. Thank you, Commander, but I can't withdraw, Jai-Ho said firmly. Not just for Earth's reputation, but for all the others he's hurt. Someone needs to show that his kind of fighting isn't invincible. Commander Lee turned back from the window. Then we have work to do. You have 3 days to prepare for the toughest fight of your life. She picked up her own datapad. I'll help you train, but on one condition. What's that? Jai-Ho asked. When this is over, you have to tell me more about these Earth combat techniques of yours. She smiled. Especially the ones your grandmother taught you. Jai-Ho bowed deeply. Yes, Commander. Thank you. As they left the office to begin training, Su-Min touched Jai-Ho's arm. Be careful, she whispered. The whole academy will be watching this fight. Good, Jai-Ho replied. Then they'll all see what happens when a warlord underestimates a human cadet. The academy's private training room was silent except for Jai-Ho's steady breathing. He stood perfectly still, eyes closed, feeling the artificial gravity field around him. Commander Lee watched from the control panel, adjusting the settings. Ready? She asked. I'm going to match the gravity to Q1's homeworld. Jai-Ho nodded. The air grew lighter, and he felt his body trying to float. At 0.7 times Earth's gravity, everything felt wrong. He took a step and almost jumped. This is how the Warlord trains, Commander Lee explained. His people evolved in lower gravity. It's why they can grow so tall without their bones breaking. Jai-Ho tried to punch a training dummy. His fist went too fast, throwing him off balance. No wonder he thinks humans are weak, he said. In his gravity, we look slow and clumsy. But the match will be in standard Alliance gravity, Su-min said from her seat near the door. She hadn't left Jae-ho's side since the challenge. That's the rule for official duels. Commander Lee smiled. Exactly. And what's the standard gravity setting? 1 Earth gravity, Jae-ho answered, understanding dawning on his face. The Alliance uses Earth's gravity as the standard because it's in the middle range that most species can handle. Most species train extra hard to fight in Earth gravity, Commander Lee said. But you, Jae-ho, you've lived in it your whole life. More than that, you trained with your grandmother in gravity even higher than Earth's. Jae-ho remembered the special room his grandmother had built. The gravity chamber at home went up to 1.3 times Earth normal. Grandmother said it would make me stronger. Your grandmother is a very wise woman, Commander Lee said. She walked over to Jae-ho and adjusted his stance. The warlord has never fought a human in a fair match before. He doesn't understand what you can do. Jae-ho practiced his movements again, thinking about how different they would feel to someone used to lighter gravity. But why hasn't anyone told him? Surely other academy instructors know about Earth's gravity. Oh, they know, Su-min said. But there's an old academy rule that says you can't reveal your species' natural advantages before a challenge match. It's meant to prevent fighters from changing their style to counter specific opponents. Commander Lee nodded. The rule was written centuries ago, when the Alliance was new. Back then, they were more worried about stronger species picking on weaker ones. They never imagined a primitive world like Earth would join with built-in advantages. Jae-ho thought about Q1's fighting style from the videos. The warlord used his height and reach to dominate opponents, but his movements always started slow to conserve energy. In Earth gravity, that slight delay would be his weakness. We should practice more, Jae-ho said. I need to perfect my timing. For the next 2 hours, they worked through different scenarios. Commander Lee adjusted the gravity up and down, teaching Jae-ho how to sense the smallest changes in weight and balance. Su-min called out warnings when his movements became too obvious. Near the end of the session, Commander Lee turned the gravity back to normal. Remember, Jae-ho, your advantage isn't just physical. The warlord expects you to be afraid. He thinks humans are too young as a species to understand real combat. He's wrong, Jae-ho said quietly. Humans have been fighting all through our history, sometimes against enemies much stronger than us. We learned how to survive. Show him that tomorrow, Commander Lee said. Show him what your grandmother taught you. Show him why Earth's gravity made us stronger. As they left the training room, Jae-ho felt more confident than before. Tomorrow, Q1 would learn that challenging the human cadet had been his biggest mistake. The night before the match, the Academy held a formal dinner for visiting officials. The Great Hall glowed with soft blue lights, and the sounds of conversation filled the air. Grand Warlord Q1 stood at the center of a group of admirers, telling stories of his victories. The rebel fleet thought they had me surrounded, he said, his voice carrying across the room. But they didn't understand true combat skill. He gestured with his drink. Their ships were debris within an hour. Jae-ho sat alone at a small table in the corner, watching. He had been required to attend, but preferred to stay away from the crowd. His dress uniform felt stiff and uncomfortable. Senior Instructor Dae-young approached his table quietly. Cadet Park, may I join you? Jae-ho stood and bowed. Of course, Instructor. Dae-young sat down and spoke in a low voice. I've been investigating the warlord's past challenges. There's something you should know. She placed a small data chip on the table. 3 of his previous opponents disappeared after their matches. The official records say they requested transfers, but I found no trace of them arriving at their new posts. Can you prove it? Jae-ho asked, not touching the chip. No, the evidence is hidden too well. Dae-young looked troubled. I'm telling you this so you understand what kind of opponent you face tomorrow. He doesn't just want to win. He wants to make an example of you. At that moment, Jae-ho's personal communicator buzzed. A message from Earth appeared, his grandmother calling. He excused himself and walked to a quiet corner to answer. His grandmother's face appeared on the small screen. Even through the poor connection, her eyes were sharp and alert. "Jeho, I saw the news about your challenge. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, grandmother," Jeho said. "I didn't want you to worry." "Worry?" She laughed. "Our family has faced worse challenges than one overconfident warlord." Her expression became serious. "Remember what I taught you about rivers?" Jeho nodded. "The strongest river doesn't fight the rocks. It flows around them and wears them down slowly." "Good. You remember," she smiled. "Your opponent is like a great boulder. He expects to stand firm and break whatever hits him. Show him how water can reshape stone." "Yes, grandmother." Jeho felt warmth in his chest. "Thank you for everything you taught me." After saying goodbye, Jeho returned to the main hall. The warlord was still telling stories, but now he was demonstrating combat moves. His audience gasped as he described finishing strikes that could shatter bones. Su Min found Jeho and handed him a cup of water. "You should get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." "In a minute," Jeho replied. He was studying Q1's movements as he showed off to the crowd. Even in these simple demonstrations, the warlord was clearly struggling with the standard gravity. His gestures were slightly slower than they should be, his steps a little too careful. Commander Lee appeared beside them. "Notice anything useful?" "Yes," Jeho said. "He's already tired from standing in Earth gravity all evening. But his pride won't let him admit it. Pride is his weakness." Commander Lee agreed. "Remember that tomorrow." Jeho took one last look at the warlord, then turned to leave. As he reached the door, Q1's voice called out, "Leaving so soon, Cadet? Don't you want to hear how tomorrow's story will end?" Without turning around, Jeho answered clearly, "With respect, sir, I prefer to write my own endings." He walked out, leaving silence behind him. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight, he needed to rest and remember his grandmother's lessons about rivers and stones. The Academy's grand arena was filled to capacity. 3,000 spectators sat in rising circles around the central fighting platform. The platform itself was simple, a 30-meter circle of dark blue material that absorbed impact. No weapons were allowed in traditional combat. Jeho stood at one entrance, wearing the plain white training uniform of a cadet. Commander Lee helped him with his final preparations. "Remember your breathing," she said, checking his uniform one last time. "Stay calm and let him make the first moves." Across the arena, Grand Warlord Q1 entered wearing his formal combat gear. The black material gleamed under the lights, and his medals caught the light as he moved. He looked confident, but Jeho noticed his slightly careful steps. The Earth normal gravity was already affecting him. The Academy director stood and raised her hands for silence. "This is an official challenge match between Grand Warlord Q1 and Cadet Jeho Park. Standard Alliance rules apply. The match ends with surrender or inability to continue. Begin when ready." Q1 stepped onto the platform first, moving to the center. He stood straight and tall, looking down at Jeho with a slight smile. Jeho walked forward calmly, stopping 3 meters away. They bowed to each other, following tradition. "Last chance to withdraw, Cadet," Q1 said quietly. "There's no shame in admitting you're outmatched." Jeho remained silent, settling into his grandmother's first stance. Feet placed just so, hands relaxed at his sides. The stance looked casual, almost careless. He saw confusion flash across Q1's face. The warlord attacked first, as Jeho had expected. It was a standard opening move, a straight punch designed to test an opponent's defense. But the punch came slightly slower than it should have, fighting against the gravity. Jeho didn't block. Instead, he moved like water around a stone, letting the punch pass by with millimeters to spare. Q1's momentum carried him forward, his balance shifting just a fraction. That fraction was all Jeho needed. A light touch to the warlord's extended arm, a subtle shift of weight, and Q1 stumbled. He caught himself quickly, but his face showed surprise. "Fight properly," Q1 demanded, launching into a series of powerful strikes. Each attack was technically perfect, backed by centuries of experience. But in Earth's gravity, each move cost him more energy than he expected. Jaiho continued to flow around the attacks, never blocking directly, never striking back. He moved like his grandmother had taught him, letting the warlord's own strength and mass work against him. The audience watched in silence as the mighty warrior seemed to fight against himself. 5 minutes passed. Q1's breathing grew heavier. His attacks became stronger but slower, fueled by growing frustration. Jiho remained calm, his movements efficient and precise. Finally, Q1 gathered himself for his famous finishing move, a combination of strikes that had never failed him. He launched forward with all his remaining strength. Jiho saw the attack coming. As the warlord committed to his final strike, Jiho moved inside his guard. One hand guided Q1's arm past, while the other pressed lightly on his chest. The warlord's own momentum and weight did the rest. Grand Warlord Q1, terror of 3 sectors, found himself lying on his back on the platform. Jiho stood calmly beside him, hands again relaxed at his sides. The arena was completely silent. Then Commander Lee started clapping. The sound spread until the whole arena thundered with applause. Jiho bowed to his fallen opponent and offered his hand. "Thank you for the match, sir." Q1 looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached up and took it. The match was over. A human cadet had defeated a galactic warlord using nothing but skill, patience, and an understanding of gravity that his opponent had never considered. The Academy Medical Center was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Jiho sat on an examination table while doctors ran their scans. Commander Lee and Senior Instructor De Young stood nearby, watching the process with interest. "Fascinating," said the head doctor, looking at his readings. "Your muscle density is 30% higher than our records predicted for humans, and your reaction time is exceptional." Before Jiho could respond, the door slid open. Grand Warlord Q1 entered, followed by 2 Alliance officials. His formal uniform was wrinkled from the match, but he walked with his usual proud posture. "I demand an investigation," Q1 announced. "The cadet must have used illegal enhancements. No natural human could move like that." Commander Lee stepped forward. "All of Cadet Park's abilities are completely natural, Warlord. Perhaps you'd like to see the evidence." The head doctor nodded and displayed his findings on the main screen. These scans show the effects of long-term adaptation to Earth's gravity. Cadet Park's physical capabilities are the result of natural human development in a 1G environment, enhanced by specialized training. "Impossible," Q1 said, but with less certainty. "Humans are from a primitive world. They've only been in space for 50 years. Gravity doesn't care how long we've been in space," Jiho said quietly. "It shaped us long before we knew about other worlds." Senior Instructor De Young spoke up. "There's something else you should know, Warlord. We found records of your previous challengers, the ones who disappeared after their matches." The room went very still. Q1's face darkened. "You have no proof of anything." "We don't need proof now," De Young replied. "Your reaction just confirmed it. The Alliance Council will be very interested in reviewing those cases." Jiho watched as the proud warlord seemed to shrink slightly. All his power and reputation were crumbling because he had chosen the wrong cadet to challenge. "Your combat technique was remarkable," Q1 said suddenly, looking at Jiho. "I've never seen anything like it. Where did you learn to fight that way?" "From my grandmother," Jiho answered. "She taught me that true strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about understanding yourself and your opponent." The warlord was quiet for a moment. Perhaps there are things I could learn from Earth's combat traditions." Commander Lee smiled. The Academy would welcome your expertise, Warlord. As an instructor, perhaps, teaching students about different fighting styles across the galaxy. Q1 looked surprised at the offer. It was a way to save face, to turn defeat into a new beginning. Slowly, he nodded. The Alliance officials looked relieved. One of them stepped forward. We'll need to update our combat training protocols. It seems we've underestimated the effects of planetary gravity on different species. That's not all you've underestimated, Commander Lee said. Maybe it's time for the Alliance to reconsider what makes a species advanced or primitive. As the officials talked, Jeho thought about sending a message to his grandmother. She would be proud, not because he won, but because he won the right way. He had shown that humanity's strength came from wisdom as much as physics. The head doctor finished his scans and gave Jeho permission to leave. As he walked out, Q1 called after him. Cadet Park, would you be willing to teach me that last move you used? Jeho turned back and smiled. Of course, sir. My grandmother always says that knowledge shared is knowledge doubled. 6 months after the famous match, the Galactic Military Academy had changed in many ways. The morning sun shone through the training hall windows, where Jeho watched a class of 30 students practicing Earth combat techniques. They came from 15 different worlds, each moving at their own pace as they learned to understand their natural strengths. Remember to feel the gravity, Jeho called out to them. Don't fight against it. Work with it. At the back of the class, former Warlord Q1 moved through the exercises with careful attention. He had traded his military uniform for an instructor's robes, and his proud bearing had softened into something more thoughtful. After class, Commander Lee met with Jeho in her office. The new training program is working better than we hoped, she said, showing him the latest student evaluations. Combat injuries are down 40% since we started teaching different styles for different species. Grandmother will be happy to hear that, Jeho replied. She's coming next month to give some special lessons. Commander Lee smiled. The whole academy is excited to meet her. Even the council members are planning to attend her demonstration. The academy had grown busier since Jeho's victory. More humans applied to join, but also more students from high-gravity worlds who had previously thought they weren't suited for space combat. The Alliance had finally realized that every species had something valuable to teach. Jeho walked to his next class, passing the wall where the academy displayed its greatest moments. His match with Q1 played on a small screen there, next to other historic events. But he was more proud of what came after that single victory. In his advanced combat class, students from various worlds worked together, teaching each other their native fighting styles. A tall student from a low-gravity moon learned balance from a short, sturdy student from a heavy world. They all helped each other improve. Teacher Jeho called one of his students, a young cadet from Centauri Prime. Is it true that you're writing a book about Earth combat techniques? Jeho nodded. Former Warlord Q1 is helping me. We're combining Earth's traditional knowledge with what we've learned about different species' natural abilities. The story of their match had become a popular legend at the Academy. But the real story, Jeho thought, was how it changed people's minds. The Alliance had stopped dividing worlds into advanced and primitive categories. They learned that every planet's challenges created unique strengths in its people. That evening, Jeho received a message from his grandmother. She had just finished training a group of Alliance officials who visited Earth to learn about its martial arts traditions. They were surprised by our gravity, she wrote. But by the end of the month, they were moving like they had lived here all their lives. Jeho smiled as he wrote his reply. He told her about his students' progress, about Q1's dedication to learning Earth's combat arts, and about how the Academy had changed. You were right, he wrote. The greatest victory isn't defeating an opponent. It's helping them learn and grow. As he looked out at the Academy grounds, Jeho saw students from all corners of the galaxy training together under the setting sun. They weren't just learning to fight. They were learning to understand and respect each other's strengths. And that, he realized, was the most important legacy of his match with the Warlord. The future of the Alliance would be built not on power or pride, but on the wisdom that every world had something to teach, and everyone had something to learn.